So today we will be discussing about cybersecurity as an subject and why it is so much important in terms of job perspective, job interview particularly. So, firstly, as a basic introduction, if I have to say, most of the students, in terms of like cybersecurity, think that cybersecurity just means either hacking or coding tools. If I say in a layman language, particularly, but in a real company, your first job role, if I say particularly, should include monitoring alerts, checking logs, investigating any kind of suspicious activities, reducing business damage altogether. So you are, I would say, a digital security guard plus an investigator on the other hand. So you have to work both, like having both the things hand in hand, particularly if I say. So, in terms of interview, if I say what interviewer generally checks in perspective of a fresher candidate, if I say, they do not expect your, like they know you are freshers. They don't expect that you would be experienced in that particular field, if I say. So they just want to check that your thinking process, what is your thinking process towards the domain, towards the subject matter, if I particularly say. Second, I would say your response step, like how you will solve a particular issue in terms of an organizational environment in a step by step process, in a very not in descriptive manner, but in a summarized in a very specific manner, but in a step by step process. Third would be, I would be saying, on a context of prioritization ability. So many different type of task may come up to you in a single point of time. So how you prioritize them, particularly based on the requirement, based on the risk, vulnerability altogether. So these are the basic concept, or I would say, which is very important in terms of the interview perspective, if I say, which is uh, presently very viable in terms of cybersecurity, if I say. So first thing first, the first question that I will ask you in this, or I would share with you, would be on the context of what role does DNS play in cybersecurity attack? So this is the first question I'm like taking in that particular perspective. So what role does DNS play in cybersecurity attack? So can someone give a brief discussion upon this particular point? What do you understand by the term DNS? How it is so much important in the present day context of cybersecurity? Anybody?
Well, Mr. Kaustubh, can we ask them exactly what DNS is? Because,
Okay.
some of them might not even know what DNS is. So that I think,
Hmm.
yes, someone just answered domain name service. Yes.
Okay, fine, that's good. So in terms of DNS, if I say particularly, if let's take a case study based off example. So let's suppose there is a attack one in which there is a possibility of fake website redirection. So you type a real website, the DNS sends you to a fake website. So you enter a password, it may get stolen in that particular perspective. So DNS play a very vital role, and this is a kind of thing which is applicable to any kind of organization in, let's say, IT or supply chain, any perspective. If I say in a second scenario, if I say in terms of second type of attack in terms of DNS, there is a possibility of malware communication. So if I say malware communication, malware inside your company system, if I say, so there are two particular situations that can happen. Basically, first is by sending DNS request to the attacker, if I say, or in a second situation, receiving the command, if I particularly say. So even if company blocks the internet access, then also DNS is still working. That's why DNS plays a very vital role in terms of any kind of organization, in any kind of domain, if I say. So data theft continues secretly or in the background, if I particularly say. So first situation that I shared with you was regarding the fake website redirection. Second is all about malware communication. Or I would say third scenario, it's directly related to the data section, like data exfiltrations. So in this case scenario, the third method, if I say, third attack, if I say, sensitive data is broken into smaller pieces and then sent inside the DNS queries, if I say. So this is the third case scenario that can happen in this DNS case that I told you earlier. So DNS is a very important point. Why? Because generally, let's take an example that generally every kind of organization generally approves the DNS in their perspective. If I say so, if I say, let's take another example on this thing just to get a better overview on that particular point. So let's take a fourth step, like what you will do as a defense in a company in such kind of scenario. So these are few attacks that can happen to an organization. So if I say in terms of defense, security team basically needs to monitor the DNS traffic. This is very much important because this gives a particular idea that what kind of traffic or what kind of website that we are opening in terms of the organizational network, how it can affect, or I would say infiltrate the network altogether. So monitoring is a very crucial task in terms of DNS traffic or DNS in general. Second would be blocking the malicious domain. So any kind of malicious domain, like in corporate background, if I say, most like in my previous organization in finance, most of the social network based websites were not, we were not able to open that particular website from the official network. So the company has blocked all these kind of domains. Social networks, if I say particularly, any YouTube is also blocked in that particular perspective. So blocking any kind of malicious domain. One more example that I could give in that case scenario would be like torrent-based website. So these kind of website can create a possibility of, I would say, malicious component entering into the system. So blocking malicious domain is one of the crucial tasks in that sense, in terms of defense, if I say. Third step in terms of security, if I say, that needs like detects any unusual DNS behavior that is happening around the organization or in a particular span of time, if I say. So these three step particularly creates a good defense mechanism in terms of company. First is monitoring DNS traffic. Second is blocking malicious domains. And third is detecting any kind of unusual DNS behavior. So as a student takeaway on this particular point, DNS is not just for browsing, I would say. It's a major attack communication channel that can penetrate into the system or the network, if I say, and create a major impact in terms of the organization. Like it can act as a delivery agent in terms of sharing any particular malicious software, such kind of things. That's why it becomes a very crucial task in terms of monetary aspect. So this was all about DNS, and DNS is a very important question whenever we talk about in perspective of interviews, because we need to open few of the website in our day-to-day working, but we need to understand which are the website that needs to be blocked, that that can create malicious domain, then that can have malicious domain, if I particularly say. So
So,
that's
Mr.
what.
Kaustubh, sorry.
Yes.
So, Mr. Kaustubh, if I was supposed to say in terms of pointing it out in step ways, can
Hmm.
we write 3 points as to what role does DNS play? If you're just supposed to just accumulate all the whole answer in 3 points.
Okay. So what DNS do in terms of practical implementation, if I say?
Yes, yes, in
Okay.
practical implement.
Okay. So in terms of let me explain this particular thing, then we will go like I will provide the content as well. So
Sure.
DNS basically provide, what does DNS do? Uh, if I say in terms of simple explanation, these are, I would say, filtration process or filtration element that gives a specific kind of website which is regulated, or I would say which can be opened in terms of the organizational network, or which cannot be opened in terms of the organizational networks. First thing first. Second thing, it gives a basic idea that, like, if I say, let's take an example, like, think of DNS as a phone book for the internet. So, when you want to call someone, You don't need to remember their phone number. You just search their name and the contact number. So DNS works in the same way, particularly. So in terms of, let's suppose, so DNS translate the name into the number. So this acts as an identity in terms of any kind of website or IP address in general. Third point, if I say, what happens in terms of step by step process in a, in terms of opening a website, let's suppose. So let's say you type in youtube.com. So the first step is the computer will ask that, hey, what is the IP address, like this is the IP address of this particular website. This question goes to the DNS servers, if I say. Then in the second step, DNS looks into the records, like it finds any kind of correct IP address based on the thing that you have entered. In the step 3, the DNS sends the answer back, like your system now knows that, okay, this is the real location of YouTube. In the fourth step, website will open up, as in connection is properly made using the IP address. So it gives a basic idea that what kind of websites are valuable to your network, could be used. Like if I say Google Meet, or let's say Zoom, these are a website which are very important, that has to be opened, like that needs in terms of business organization, business requirement, if I say. But social media website, that has to be blocked on a very serious note. In my organization, in previous organization, generally we didn't had access regarding social media website, torrent website, particularly YouTube as well, like any kind of video based website, if I say. So it gives a fair amount of category, that which is good for the organization, which is bad for the organization in terms of website. So in terms of the third point, or I would say fourth point, the real life analogy, if I say. So without DNS, you must remember your phone numbers for every person. So with DNS, you just remember the names. You just type in the name, it will open automatically. So it gives a fair idea to the system that which kind of website you want to open. So it's just like a logbook that you have already saved in the system. But just typing the name, it will open the entire like entire website altogether. As a conclusive note, why DNS is so important. Without DNS, if I say, there would be no browsing, no emails, no cloud access, if I say, no application. So the internet would not be usable for humans. So DNS is particularly very important in terms of usage of internet, if I say. And the second question, which is particularly related to the aspect of cybersecurity, why DNS is so much important in terms of cybersecurity? Because every internet request uses DNS, and attackers try to misuse it. So this is a kind of resource which will be used in the organization no matter what the situation is. But security teams should monitor the DNS to detect any kind of malware communication, or I would say fake website, data theft scenario. So this is why DNS is a gold mine for security monitoring structure. And as a interview perspective, as a one liner definition, if I have to explain the last point, DNS converts human readable domain names into machine readable IP addresses, so system can locate website on the internet very easily. So this is all
Great.
about
Great.
DNS.
Mhm. So it was very, very nicely explained, Kaustav, to be very honest. So I've jotted down 5 points from what you were trying to say. Hopefully, I've done justice to what you've been saying.
Yes.
Yes. So any questions, anyone, with regards to the first question? Anyone, do you have any questions for this first question that Mr. Kostov answered? I think no, we can definitely move on further. Oh, so moving on further. Oh, Mr. Kostov, there's a question by Anam.
Yes. The question.
How it affects cybersecurity, like how DNS plays, just the question is like how it affects cybersecurity.
Okay.
She's asking.
Okay. So if I take an example in terms of cybersecurity, like Why DNS is so much important in terms of cybersecurity? Because every internet request uses the DNS particularly. So without DNS, you would not be able to open up a website. So that's why DNS is so much important. And as a cybersecurity perspective, a malware or a virus could enter into your system through internet only. So DNS act like a bridge, I would say. So you have to monitor that bridge so that there is no illegal migration of any kind of malware virus into the system through the way of DNS. Or I would say DNS acts like that particular bridge. So you have to monitor that particular bridge so that there is no illegal immigration of, I would say, virus malware altogether.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Kostov. So hopefully, Anam, your question was answered. Now, there's one more question here, is that what the need of changing DNS permanently or temporarily? Like, is there any need to change the DNS?
So it depends on the organizational requirement. Like for example, let's say there is large requirement. Like at a certain point of time, the organization is implementing the cloud technology across the organization. So they need to upload a lot of document like uh, software, like soft copies of the documents into the cloud servers. So this will require a few kind of new access that has to be granted in terms of DNS. So in that case scenario, you have to open the access for that particular task for a few minutes of time, or I would say a few hours particularly. Then afterwards, you can restrict that particular access afterwards. So it depends upon the usage. Like one more example that I can give in that perspective, like let's suppose you're using a new HRMS software inside the organization. So you need few admin access for that thing. So you can grant admin access for a few hours or few minutes, if I say. Then afterwards you can revoke it. So it depends on the organizational perspective that how you would be able to use it in terms of like giving admin access or revoking in that particular perspective.
Okay, that's great. So there's one more question here by Richard saying that which software or platform do you utilize to detect DNS cyber attacks and implement the corresponding solution?
Okay, this is a very important question that you need to know about in terms of DNS. So everything is in the present day technology is used in terms of software. So in terms of, if I say DNS, what are the important or popular software which is used in terms of DNA, if I particularly say? So first thing is you need to have a DNS server. So this basically stores website name, IP address. To run this service, we install the software basically. So in terms of software, so the most common DNS software which is used in terms of present day technology is first is Bind, BIND. Mostly used in terms of Linux servers. This is very powerful as well, used by large organization generally. If I take a real world example, many internet provider run DNS using the Bind as a software particularly. Second is, I would say, Microsoft DNS Server. So come it basically comes with Windows Server. That's why it is also very popular, very common in corporate environment. If I say it integrates very easily with the Active Directory that you already have within the organization. And as a real time like real world example, in companies where login happens using like a company username, like email address is having the username, or I would say password particularly. So DNS helps to find these particular domain controller. And so Windows based companies generally which uses Windows services generally prefer Windows DNS on a heavy usage. Third example I would give in terms of this thing is Unbound. This is also very fast and secure kind of DNS version, used by like used for secure DNS resolution, if I say. Very popular in security focused environment, which in the organization where security matters a lot. Like if I say government bodies, such kind of examples, if I say. Then another example is Power DNS. This is also like high performance example, like high performance DNS service provider used by hosting providers particularly. and this is very easy to scale. So generally smaller organization, or I would say startups, generally prefer power DNS. So these are few example in terms of softwares.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. So, any questions, anyone? I think Mr. Kostov have answered more or less all of your questions. I think we can move forward to the next question, right? Mr. Kostov, can
Yes,
we go
yes,
ahead and
sure,
move
sure,
forward?
sure.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. So, just give me a second. Now, the second question is, if you notice unusual outbound traffic at midnight, what steps would you take?
So this is a very relevant question in terms of the day-to-day environment in which you are working in terms of a cyber security expert. So I would say this is a real SOC interview based question, particularly if I say SOC based interview question. So let's take a case scenario that it's like 12:30 a.m. and a system is sending huge data to another country, let's suppose, and you have observed this particular thing. So as a step by step investigation mindset, like what you have to do in that case scenario, what are the checklists that you have to follow in terms of the organization. These are the examples of that particular checklist. The step one is basically stay calm and validate. So staying calm is very important because generally these type of things generally it happens, it creates a panic situation in the organization, particularly for the employees. So basically ask a simple question: which system is used in that particular perspective? Is either it could be user like a laptop or a server. Firstly, identify the asset which is involved in that particular scenario. Firstly, this is one of the crucial tasks. Second is step as a step, if I say, and I'm talking step by step in a step by step process. The second step, you have to check that if it is a normal activity or it is a abnormal activity. Like if I say, possible valid reason could be like in terms of schedule backup. So everything, like it can happen like someone is doing the backup from his end. Either there could be situation of patching update, like software patching and these kind of scenario. Like um, if I say, take as an example, like if the let's suppose antivirus is getting updated, or I would say firewall is getting updated, so this can happen. On the other hand, as a third example, as a valid reason would be cloud synchronization. In that case scenario, there is a heavy data usage. So if it's these kind of situations, then it is okay. So you can close the alert. There is no major thing in terms of panic that happens with every organization, every employee. These kind of like they do these kind of tasks in the IT domain, if I say. If it is suspicious, let's suppose, these are the normal activity that I said. If it is suspicious, let's suppose, so you have to check who logged in. So you have to check the login status, like like the entire log history you have to verify. Second point is what process is running in the background, like which software it is running, like it is authorized by the system in terms of the organizational softwares, or it is using unauthorized software. Let's suppose you have to check the background information in terms of software particularly. Third, and the most crucial part, where data is going, like which particular who is the receiver of this particular data. And this is the most important question in this case of suspicious activity, if I say. um, if I take an example, do you know about a thing that happened in terms of Equifax during 2018? So Equifax is a very big organization. So during 2018, I think it happened between 2017 and 18. They faced a big cyber attack on their platform because of a security patch issue. So the same kind of scenario was happening, and because they were not updated in terms of the software, and because of that thing, a large amount of customer information got leaked. And because of that thing, Equifax has to compensate a huge amount to the customers, and on the other hand, their CEO has to resign as well. So this particular scenario, like this particular case, is one of the catalyst event. After this incident, many corporate companies took cybersecurity very seriously. So you can run through this particular case study in the internet. This is called Equifax cyber attack that happened between 2017 or 2018, I think. So check this particular case scenario. This is a very interesting case scenario, and this is one of the catalyst event that created awareness regarding the cybersecurity element across the corporate background, if I say. Then we understood the suspicious activity, like where it is going, who logged in, what process is running in this background. The fourth step that you have to check in that case scenario is risk deduct decision basically. Risk decision basically is if clearly it is a malicious activity. Now you are sure that it is a malicious activity, then firstly you have to do is to isolate the system from the network. So in simple words, you have to switch it off. In simple words, you have to isolate the system from your network so that your network would not be compromised, or in other words, if I say, it would not migrate into other IT bodies, if I say, other servers that you are using, or other laptops that are working in the organization, if I say. So isolation is very much important. So let me give you an example on this. So whenever we talk about, there is a in terms of risk, whenever we talk about there is a term called attack trees. Do you know about attack trees? Anybody know about attack tree? Like what is attack tree, how it happens? So let's take another example. Maybe you would be knowing about this particular thing. So there are different types of I would say models in terms of risk analysis, which is used by different types of organization. So I would say there are few like vast, there is stride model as well. So one of the particular scenario, or one of the particular example which is used in I would say step by step process, is called let me go through my notes as well, just a second, just a second. Yes. So basically, there is a model called VAST. So VAST follows a step-by-step process. If someone or some, I would say, IT resource, particularly server or laptop, is infected by any kind of malicious virus, if I say, if you are able to remove the excess of that particular resource from the network, then the entire activity would collapse altogether. So that's why isolating that particular resource, I would say, in terms of laptop, or I would say any kind of digital device in general, is very much important in, like, in terms of maintaining the integrity of the network. So this plays a very vital role, so that it would not be able to infect the other bodies, particularly like servers, other laptops. So this is a very crucial task in that particular perspective. So after this thing, so you understood this is a kind of a serious issue. There is a transaction of malicious software which is going around. So now you have to isolate the entire thing altogether. After this,
Oh,
but yes,
no, no, please continue.
okay. So after this particular scenario, the last, or I would say the most crucial aspect would be informing the incident response team. So every organization has its own incident response team. So this particular teams take care of such kind of scenario, and they have to create a plan, so that like these kind of situation doesn't go into like a out of box scenario, if I say. So informing the required stakeholders, incident response team, the correct stakeholders in terms of the organization is very much important. So these are the steps that you have to check in mind, or check in your process in terms of any unusual outbound traffic which is happening in terms of the organization. So as a single line, if I have to conclude this particular thing, do not say that I will immediately shut down the system. Firstly, so most of the students or employee generally, it like in a panic situation, will directly switch off the system basically or shut down the system altogether. So this is not the actual. I would say it is not a good thing. First, investigate, then act upon it. So investigation is one of the crucial tasks in your profile. So don't take any particular decision on a panic basis or on a very random basis. So your job is not to panic, but and not to ignore as well, but to verify, analyze, and contain the situation at your level with your best effort. So that's my closure on this particular question. Any particular question from your side?
Any questions, anyone? Hopefully, the points that are written here are okay for all of you. Okay, I think we can move on to the next question, Mr. Costa.
Okay, okay. So the
Just give me
third question is, yeah, you can change the slide.
a minute. Okay, so the third question is, why is identity considered the new security perimeter?
So in terms of this particular question, so there are two different ideologies which was working in the industrial IT industrial age or IT industry in general, and there is a new world order which is happening in terms of security parameter. So the old world order was the security is equal to office building firewall. So inside office it is safe, let's suppose. So in today's world, if I take in perspective of which is the modern tech approach, employees work from home. Firstly, they use mobiles. They use mobile as an like mobile workplace scenario. They use cloud a lot of time. So network boundary is totally gone right now, especially after COVID. So after COVID, if I say most of the organization have shifted towards remote working culture, most of the employees are working in that particular perspective. So in that case scenario, how you can maintain the integrity of the system is a very crucial task in terms of security parameters. In the earlier days, most of the work was done in terms of the organizational space or I would say office space only. But now we are working in the remote setting and that creates a major issue. So the new security gate, if I say, particularly depends on who is logging in, like which particular person has logged into the system, from where he or she has login, and which device he has logged from. So these three are the key questions, like which particular person, from which location, and which device. So as a step by step protection, like what you have to do in terms of new security parameter, first we need to have strong password. This is, I would say, the first layer of defense. So like in terms of password, if I say, we need to have multiple characters. So these are the kind of guidelines that you can share in the organization, that every password should have multiple characters, special characters, numbers, alphabets, small, big, everything. Second layer, if I say, is multi-factor authentication. So MFA is a very crucial aspect in terms of cybersecurity right now, and I would say most important as well. Even if the password is stolen, in that case scenario, if we have multi-factor authentication, we can attack the blocker. So this is the I would say crucial, or I would say the cutting edge technology of multi-factor authentication in terms of cybersecurity. So even if your password is stolen, you would be able to block the attacker because we are having MFA. The third is device trust. The third point, if I say, why device trust, basically only company laptops are allowed. That's why it is said security is directly related to the device. That's why I said in the earlier example, from which particular place, which from which device he has done the login, if I say. So generally we have to create a very strict policy that in case of any organizational work, you need to use your company laptop only. So there is no compromise on that particular statement. Fourth point, as a checklist or a step by step protection, would be location check. So like login from another country, then it should be blocked in that case scenario. So even in that case, let's suppose if I'm working from India and I'm working for a company which is based out in US, so I have to describe my working location firsthand so that the organization would be able to know that from which location I'm working on. And as an additional point on this particular part, VPN is a very restrictive thing that we should not allow. VPN should not be allowed in any case scenario. In some of the like these kind of scenario, when um, the employee is doing something wrong, they generally use VPN network so that nobody would be able to detect them. So VPN as a service should be blocked in any case scenarios. So this is one of the crucial aspect, and this is related to the DNS as well. So VPN should not be allowed, and I would say should be blocked in any case scenario. So if I take a real world example on the same thing, many breaches that happens either happens because of the either stolen credentials, I would say, or like not hacking, I would say, like from the software end part, like from the backend operations, like if there is a problem or major loophole in terms of the coding process. So these are the only way that breach can happen. But the thing we as a cybersecurity expert can do in terms of the line of defense is to create a good defense mechanism in terms of credential that plays a very vital role in any organization. So, as a student takeaway, if I have to give you a basic takeaway point, identity protection is directly related to the modern security, cybersecurity aspect. Identity protection is directly related to the modern cybersecurity perspective. So, any particular question on this? So it is all about multi-factor authentication, the password requirement. One more thing to add on this point. So there should be mandatory password change in every organization. Like you should make a policy that in every 3 months or every 6 month, password should have to be changed for crucial login points, particularly. So this should be in the, I would say, IT rule book or IT policy, particularly.
Okay, now in this scenario, Mr. Kostav, I there was a question for a previous question that we went was how would you differentiate between a legitimate and a malicious activity in an
Okay.
outbound traffic?
Okay, so if I say first of the first case scenario, you have to check the URL. So URL plays a very vital role in terms of understanding if there is a major issue, if I say. Second thing I would say VPN. That's why I took the point of VPN. Are they using, generally attackers use VPN so that nobody could be able to track them regarding their location, regarding their like device. So you have to check that the person is using VPN or not. So this is also a very crucial aspect. URL, VPN, any other example if I could give in terms of detecting that particular outbound traffic, I would say uh, these are the core element in terms of like detection, which are generally used. If I say any other example, I will like right now I don't have that particular example right now.
No worries. I think you explained it quite nicely, Mr. Kostov. So, can we go ahead and move to the next slide, Mr. Kostov? Can we go ahead and move?
Yes, yes, sure, sure, sure.
Okay, perfect. So, now the fourth question is, how would you design an effective ransomware defense strategy?
So this particular question is kind of a thing which is part of the policy making part. So let's start with the business impact first. Firstly, so because it's part of the strategy, it is directly related to the operations or the business activity in general. So if ransomware hits, company work stop. Basically, every operation would be stopped in that case scenario. There would be possibility of monetary loss as well. There is reputational damage as well. The third and most important aspect of that particular thing. So the goal is to create a business continuity in any case scenario. So anything happens in terms of background, the business should not be stopped. Like, let's take an example that many these kind of organization like e-commerce website, let's suppose, during the peak hours or holiday season, their platform faces a kind of a glitch. Like, either there is a like possibility of denial of service in terms of payment, or their application is not properly working. So you have to maintain, like, you have to keep in your mind that these kind of situation can happen, and this can affect the entire business ecosystem altogether. So, in terms of using a effective ransomware defense strategy, the first layer, if I say, this is the point to note down. The first layer would be prevent entry. In simple word, prevent entry in a sense of email security. The steps that you have to take: email security first, system update. So everything should be updated of in terms of software, firewall, these kind of things. Block any unknown software which is not known in terms of, which is not coming in terms of the organization policy, which is harmful for the network. These the same example VPN I would give, like torrent website, these kind of things. Or I would say any particular software that they have installed which is not legal, if I particularly say. And third would be, fourth point would be user awareness. Basically, user awareness includes, like, you need to provide a basic training of cybersecurity to every employee. This is a very important aspect. Like, if I take an example of finance industry in India right now, as per the mandate of Reserve Bank of India, which is the governing body of all the bank, has created a mandatory policy that any kind of employee which is coming inside a finance organization has to be provided with a mandatory training on cybersecurity in during the induction process only. So user awareness is very crucial, I would say, in terms of creating a good ransomware defense strategy. Second layer, if I say, the first one is prevent entry. Basically, second layer in that case scenario is to detect early. Early detection is one of the key aspect in this thing. So if I say early detection, basically security tools can look for sudden file encryption that is happening in terms of background, mass file renaming, like randomly there is renaming of major files, or I would say large number of files are getting renamed. And third would be like unusual admin activity, like there has been like admin access has been granted to many people at a single point of time. So this creates a very sign that has to be detected very early on. So this may create a situation afterward that may create a very out of the box situation for the organization. So encryption, mass file renaming, the third would be admin activity. Third layer, if I say, is basically recover fast. So recovery is one of the critical aspect. So let's take an example that you are an e-commerce website. During the holiday season, there is a high traffic on your website, and the payment is not working properly. Payment gateway is not properly working. So for a few minutes of time, you have to stop that particular service. But after the entire done, like you have identified the issue, now the recovery should be as soon as possible, so that the customers would be able to feel they would be able to use the service as soon as possible. So backups, in terms of recovery, a backup must be offline. So you have to be very sure that the backup should be available in the offline module 24/7. Second is not, it should not be accessible to the attacker. So any kind of backup files, or I would say backup documents, which is very important in terms of the recovery process, if I say, should not be accessible to the attacker at any given point. And third is, it should be regularly tested, no matter, like, most of the scenarios, if I say, people don't take it very seriously, and that's why they don't regularly test it as well. So we need to test them on a very regular basis, that it is working or not, like backups are properly working or not, recovery process is fast enough particularly. So in a, if I say real learning, as a real life learning on that thing, You must have heard about a thing called WannaCry. WannaCry was kind of a malware. So companies with backup during the WannaCry attack survive that particular incident very easily. But the companies which didn't had backup running, or I would say proper backup during the offline process, were the organization which faced the major impact in terms of WannaCry as a malware particularly. So you can, this is a very good research point for you. So you can research about WannaCry malware in the internet. It will give you a different perspective, like why it happened, which particular companies got affected by that particular thing. So most of the company which survived through WannaCry was because of the reason they had good backup running inside the organization. So, as a student takeaway, the first thing is antivirus is not just enough. Backup saves the business in any case scenario. So that's all about this particular question.
Okay. So, Mr. Kaustubh, there's a question over here. There are
Hmm.
two questions, in fact. The first one is, what tools are used for early detection? And
Hmm.
second, what role does SOAR tool play in ransomware containment? So, both of them are quite related questions.
The second question: what tool? Like, can you
SOAR,
provide me the
SOAR, SOAR plays in ransomware containment.
SOAR? Okay. So what? So let me address the first one. So if I take SOAR in terms of detection process, in terms of these kind of scenario, so let's take in case study on this thing. Mm, so if I take, let's suppose, mm, okay. So let's take an example like if SOAR, yes, I got the point. So SOAR is mostly refers to as a cybersecurity, I would say, orchestrated automation and response in cybersecurity context. Like this particularly is related to the response system, if I say, and it is very much important in a process of detention process, particularly if I say. So, as a SOAR definition, if I have to explain, like SOAR integrates security tools for the orchestration, like coordinated data flows, automation activity, or I would say in terms of streamlining the process, like alert triangle and evidence collection in this case scenario, if I say. So, in case of detection, if I say, during the threat detection process, SOAR particularly automates the containment or detection action very easily, such as I would say blocking the IP address, or I would say quarantining the files, or isolating the network to prevent any kind of spread. So this basically cuts the mean time of to respond regarding MTTR from hours to minutes. So basically, it reduces the time so that we can control the infection around the network, if I say. In terms of relevance to user, if why it is very relevant to the users, if I say, given based on your IT governance, or I would say cloud focus, healthcare cloud focus, SOAR basically enhances your compliance. Firstly, if I take an example on like ISO 38000, risk process is one of the key element in terms of compliance. By logging auditable response and integrating the SIEM tools in the organization. So this was particularly about the SOAR, and that's why it is so much usable in terms of these kind of examples. The second question
Great.
was the first one.
Yes, what tools are used for detection of malware in early stage?
Okay. So if I take what tools are generally used in terms of malware detections, okay. So there are various tools which are used, I would say. This particularly depends on the organizational cybersecurity status, their operations particularly. So I will provide you few of the tools particularly. First is static analysis tool. This is like a this is a pre-studio perform quick triage on the executable. Sorry, like let me give you an example on pre-studio. So let me have a brief discussion on this because I have to cover one more topic. So static analysis tool. Second is dynamic sandbox tool. Third would be endpoint protection platforms. This is also very used in terms of like CrowdStrike, Falcon users, particularly for AI based platforms. And in terms of like, there is one more example: Pre-Studio, CrowdStrike, Joey Sandbox, JOE Sandbox. So these are basically few of the tools that are used in terms of these uh, examples.
Okay. Now, there's one more question, Mr. Kostov, is like, how do you differentiate between behavior-based effective ransomware defense
Hmm.
and signature-based detection? Like, what's the difference between the two?
Behavior
And then
and
again, behavioral and signature-based.
signature
That's
based.
yes,
That.
that's the question.
Hmm.
Continuing the question is like,
Hmm.
if at all you are in a ransomware scenario, how would
Hmm.
you go ahead and come out of it? Like, are you supposed to pay like without paying any ransom? How are you supposed to come out of it? How are you supposed to restore the operation?
Okay. So let's take the first one, which basically means behavior and signature based detection, if I say.
Yes.
So in this case scenario, signature based, or I would say in terms of behavior based detection, are core method in terms of cybersecurity for identifying the threats like malware or intrusion particularly. So signature based detection, this method scans for exact matches against a database for like a predefined signature, like a unique fingerprints, like file hashing, if I say code string particularly, or I would say network patterns from known threat particularly. So it basically excels in quickly detecting any kind of familiar kind of attack with high accuracy and low false positives. And traditional antiviruses tool primarily use this kind of methodology, the signature based detection, require, because this require constant database update. So that's why software updation is very much important in terms of signature based detection. The second is behavior based detection. So behavior based system monitor, basically if I say, behavior based system monitor runtime, basically it works on runtime actions, flagging basically any kind of deviation from normal baseline which is set around the organization, such as any unusual file access, or I would say process spawning, or network spikes, often powered by machine learning. So this is more of a thing which is part of the coding process. So it proactively catches any kind of unknown threats, including polymorphic malware or 0 days, by analyzing if it acts maliciously. Like it basically tracks the activity, and by that way they would be able to detect that it is like a false kind of thing or it is a real kind of thing in terms of implementation part. So if I take,
Okay, that's
so that's all. As in any further point on this thing, if I take a approach basis, so signature is particularly more of a reactive approach, and behavior is more of a proactive approach.
okay, great. So, Mr. Kostov, I think most of the questions were answered over here. Can we go ahead and move forward?
Yes, yes, the last question.
Sure. So the last question is, sorry, the last question is, how do you prioritize vulnerabilities during a risk assessment?
So this is very important in terms of practical implementation, if I say. So as a beginner's approach, if I have to take a beginner's approach, like fix the highest score first. Like every vulnerability has its own scoring. So based on that particular scoring, we create a priority that which kind of vulnerability has to be addressed first and which are to be done later on. So as a very crucial task, or I would say in a very crucial initial assessment, picks the highest score first. This is one of the key element in terms of prioritization of vulnerability. If I take a real company approach, like risk based approach, if I particularly say, let's take a step by step process. So in the step one, the business critical system, you have to identify the business critical system, like the assets which are very important for the business, like payment servers, I would say test machines, uh, cloud servers. So you have to take note, or I would say you have to jot down all the critical assets which are working in the background, which is running the entire organization, if I say, in terms of IT infrastructure. The second step that you have to take is to understand internet exposure. Like, is internet facing any kind of high risk? So it is more of a network based approach. So you have to check, like, if there is a high unusual activity in terms of network, there is high, like, you have to create a benchmark in terms of, like, if there is high usage above this particular value, then there could be a possibility of these kind of vulnerability which is happening in the sense of background. So benchmark in terms of network usage is one of the key element in terms of internet exposure. Then, as a step 3, is attack already happening in the real world scenario? Like, if it is urgent, you have to urgently fix it. Like, as I said in the earlier perspective, if it is having a high rating, and generally softwares gives us the rating on a real time basis, so we have dashboards, so by that way you would be able to get the rating on a real time basis. If it is having high score, you have to fix it on a very urgent basis. This is a very important aspect on this entire point, if I say. As a step 4, the last one, you have to analyze the level of access the attacker is getting. Like, if he is getting the full system control, then it is a top priority for us. Like, if he is having multiple admin access, so this is a top priority for us. So you have to understand up to what level he's getting the control inside the system. If he's having a major control element in terms of admin access, let's suppose, or password access, if I say, so this is a top priority. So you have to solve that particular issue on a very serious note. So in terms of, like, let's say classroom activity, or in terms of, let's take in question, like, which to fix first. I'm taking two particular example. Like, in this particular case, which have to be fixed first? Medium bug on the live website, or critical bug on the lab system? I'm asking you a question. Which thing you will fix first? Either you will fix the medium bug on live website, or you will fix the critical bug on the lab system.
Most of them are saying critical.
No, you have to solve the live website, because it is happening in the live context. Like, if there is a user, let's suppose, if there is a customer who is watching the entire system from the internet, and it is like doing the live activity, then the entire vulnerability would be visible to the entire customer base. So live website has to be addressed on a very critical basis, on, like, I would say, on a very priority basis, because it is happening in the sense of live activity. Critical bug, based on the lab system, could be addressed later on. So in this case scenario particularly, live website or medium bug in terms of live website is a much more critical segment that you have to go through. As a key takeaway, in this case scenario, in this particular example, if I say, the cyber security is directly equal to the business protection. So if the key element in this case scenario is scoring, so scoring is not, if it is not accurate, then you as a cybersecurity expert would not be able to process the request on a very timely manner. So scoring plays a very vital role. So this is like a key takeaway that you have to check in your mind. Scoring system that is used inside the organization in terms of vulnerability, in terms of risk assessment, if I say, has to be very accurate. If scoring is bad, then, let's say, if the architecture is bad, then the entire infrastructure would collapse very quickly. So scoring plays a very vital role in terms of risk assessment, particularly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kostov. Any more questions for this particular question? Anybody? Any questions, anyone? I don't think so. There's any further question.
Okay.
Okay, we have one question. How would
Yes.
you prioritize a approach differ in high velocity threat environment where there are various high severities?
Okay, how would you prioritize in terms of? Can you repeat the question once again?
Sure.
Hmm?
How would you prioritize
Hmm?
approach
Hmm?
in different high velocity threat environment where
Hmm?
there are various high severities? So there are various there are various obstacles here or
Hmm?
various approach. Like what would be your approach for various high severity options?
Okay. So this is a very good question actually. This is a very critical and very crucial question in terms of AI environment, or I would say in the context that we are using so much of internet right now. So in this particular scenario, uh, what kind of approach we have to follow? First thing first, we have to understand business impact, like which particular things are creating major impact in terms of business. And as a matter of fact, there are few frameworks which are very crucial in that, or I would say which are very efficient in that particular perspective. For one, that I would strongly take an example would be NIST cybersecurity framework. So firstly, we have to focus on key factors, which is firstly is business impact. Second is data sensitivity. Third would be scope and recoverability, like evaluate the spread, like how fast the spread could happen in terms of the organization, if I say, especially in terms of high velocity attack. And another point I would take in that case scenario is business intelligence, like use behavior signature from prior context to score unknown, or I would say known threat particularly. So if I take,
Kaustav,
yes,
sorry to disturb you. The question, like someone reframed the question. It says that, if you have several high priorities, which
okay.
one would you select first? That's the question here currently.
Okay, that's why I'm talking about, like, in terms of business impact is one of the key element. Like if we have
Okay.
multiple factors, so anything which is damaging the business or operations in general. Let's take an example. I am a taxi aggregator like Uber. So anything as in malware which can impact my business in terms of my driver's information or their location, particularly location overview with the customer. So this will directly impact the business particularly. So that thing is one of the key aspect in terms of high velocity segment. Second, as I said, data sensitivity. Mm, any other point on this particular thing I would use is like most of the organization generally implement automated triage using source system that the we earlier discussed as a platform, and we generally adopt NIST as a cybersecurity detection process. That's why I said NIST cybersecurity as a framework plays a very vital role in these kind of situations, if I say, because NIST prioritizes on functional impact and particularly on the recoverability. And on the other hand, if I take another example as a framework would be SANS, because it primarily works on identification, then on the containment process. So
Agree.
that's all for
Agree.
this particular part.
Okay.
Thank you for watching. Switch from non-IT to IT today. Explore www.thinkcloudly.com.